So I just made a short list of all the people, and you alluded to this earlier in the call, Jen. Here are all the people that wanted Kennedy dead.
Right.
The Texas establishment, which included the Bush family and Lyndon Johnson, the oil industry, because he was going after their depreciation allowance, and the oil industry profits massively from this crazy depreciation allowance. You take that away and they're less profitable. U.S. and global organized crime, because the Kennedys were after organized crime. Disgruntled ex and active CIA assassination and coup advocates and specialists, because a lot of them were fired. High-level participants in the global heroin trade, including the banks that finance it. The nuclear weapons industry didn't like him because he was trying to pull back on nuclear weapon development in the U.S. The arms industry as a whole. People with burning grudges against Castro's Cuba, including but not limited to Cuban emigres. Organized crime was very mad about what happened in Cuba. And so were the Bushes, who had a lot of money in Cuba, which people don't talk about. Industrialists, especially, but not limited to the steel industry. Extreme right-wing fanatics, including individuals with leadership roles in the U.S. military. The director for life of the FBI. And finally, the one no one ever mentions, supporters of Israel's covert program to become a nuclear power.
Huh.
Now, a lot of people are very informed about the first 11 that I listed.
Yeah.
And if you read a conspiracy book or go to a conspiracy conference or listen to a conspiracy podcast, they'll tell you about everything. You know, who shined Jack Ruby's shoes the day he shot Oswald. You can find out everything, but they will never mention this one element. Okay. And now we had a film that came out by Oliver Stone, JFK, which was a good film. And it was one of the first to introduce the idea of this deep state. It was one of the first to introduce the idea to the public that the Vietnam War was somehow a motivational factor. But who wrote the check for JFK, the movie? Because you always got to see who wrote the check. Right. A guy named Arnon Milchan. Arnon Milchan is one of the guys indicted with Benjamin Netanyahu right now. That's why, if we remember way back before this slaughter of innocents, Netanyahu was on his way to court, if not jail.
Yeah, for fraud, corruption, right? It was corruption charges. And
the corruptor was Arnon Milchan. Arnon Milchan is a brilliant man. That's what they say. He was involved in helping the Israelis steal nuclear technology secrets from the United States. He also became he's a very active and very successful film producer, and he wrote the check for Oliver Stone to do JFK. Oliver Stone will tell you this. He's aware of all the background now. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because I
can't imagine he would like that now, like knowing that whole background now. I can't imagine. I mean, actually had him as a guest. We had Oliver Stone on.
Yeah, if you search, he's an honest guy. Once he figured out what happened, he copped to it, but he didn't know at the time. You know, You're making a film. We all know this. You have a project, somebody's bringing you money. He looks okay. You know, they're not going to interfere. But clearly there was nothing mentioned about the fact that Israel was in a mad race to get nuclear weapons at the very same time that Kennedy was killed.
And I know we were against that. We were saying no.
Oh, well, we were. You have to remember, Kennedy did the test ban treaty, and in his eyes, that was the first step to a freeze on nuclear development for weapons for all countries. And then he was talking with the Russians behind the scenes to start dismantling. That was the long-term goal, and it was a quixotic goal, an idealistic, ambitious goal. He wanted to eliminate nuclear weapons from the planet, and the first step. So he didn't want Israel or anyone else to have nuclear weapons. And remember, at that time, just England, just the U.S., France, us, China, and that was it. He didn't want a nuclear club to start.
Well, let's see how good I can channel this.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Let us re-examine our attitude towards the Soviet Union. It is discouraging to think that their leaders may actually believe that with the propagandists right. It is discouraging to read a recent authoritative Soviet text on military strategy and find on page after page wholly baseless and incredible claims, such as the allegation that American imperialist circles are preparing to unleash different types of wars, that there is a very real threat of a preventive war being unleashed by American imperialists against the Soviet Union, and that the political aims of the American imperialists are to enslave economically and politically the European and other capitalist countries, and to achieve world domination by any means of aggressive wars.
That was pretty good. It read more Matt Damon being JFK, but it was pretty good. Teresa liked it. You got $10.
There you go.
For that.
Anyone else? Thumbs up.
The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want war. We do not want now or expect a war. This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression. We shall be prepared if others wish it. We shall be alert to try to stop it. But we shall also do our part to build a world of peace where the weak are safe and the strong are just. We are not helpless before the task of hopeless of its success. Confident and unafraid, we labor on, not toward a strategy of annihilation, but toward a strategy of peace.
How long is this speech you're giving of his?
I am reading the speech that, in my opinion, is what got him killed.
Okay.
The speech that he gave as the commencement I'm not going to read the whole speech.
But when was it? Give the context
June
of
10th, 1963, American University. The peace speech, as it has come to be known. There are other parts, statements that he made that I thought were obviously very powerful, including the one about the humanization of the Soviet people, about how we are all mortal and we all breathe the same air. And when you think about why it was so important that he gave this speech, I'm sure he had an idea by the summer of '63 that his life was in danger and that he wanted to be very clear about what his intentions were as far as what risks he was willing to take. He makes it very clear that his conversations with Ben-Gurion is to basically say, I already have enough to worry about with Khrushchev. I don't need to worry about your little passion project about greater Israel or whatever the hell it is you're trying to do here, which of course is what the 6-Day War was supposed to be. If not for the attack on the USS Liberty, which you so well document in this book, and I really want to get into that, Ken, because—
Can we? Because nobody talks about that enough.
This is a huge conversation that we've had with many MAGA libertarians who've come on our show. They are not in favor of what is going on with Israel. They're actually pretty dead set against it, including our friend CanCon, who's in South Florida, who is a Marine. They're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place right now, because we've been saying that when it comes to Trump, everything it's 100% transactional. You take $100 million from the biggest Zionist in the entire world, Miriam Adelson. Yeah. You're not getting that money because she's trying to win you an election. She's giving you that money so that you can annex the West Bank. That is the whole point of the transaction. And I do think people are having a really hard time coming to terms with what this whole greater Israel mission is. And so much of what you write about regarding the cover-up, specifically by LBJ, regarding the USS Liberty attack. Never has there been a maritime attack in our nation's history that got swept under the rug. This is the only one. There's never been anything else. And it was so substantial at the time that they really thought that it could have been the end of the Israel, of the Jewish state, if you will.
It should have probably been. If it had been any other country, it probably would have been.
So if you can talk about that, I'd love to hear more insight.
Yeah, give a little background, because there's people that might not even know what the USS Liberty is. Yeah.
So the USS Liberty was called, what do they call it? A communication ship. And what it really was, this is a whole technical thing, but the NSA actually controls the military. I mean, the military can do whatever it wants, but when the NSA says we need you to do something, the military just does it. And there have been naval captains complaining about, hey, we're just taxi drivers for the NSA. So this was actually an NSA ship, a spy ship, manned by U.S. sailors, and they were surveilling what the heck was going on in Israel in this crazy war that they were conducting. That's what they do. And so the Israelis flew over it, and they had to know it was a U.S. Navy ship. It had a big American flag. It was painted the right colors. And they made the fiction that, we think it's a Egyptian freighter that's been converted for wartime purposes, at which point they came and attacked the ship. The first thing they did was shoot down the communications devices Then they napalmed the decks and shot, machine gunned all the lifeboats. Then they sent torpedo boats to try to sink it. Luckily, the torpedo boats were not fully competent, and they failed to sink the boat. The other fortunate thing, if there was anything fortunate in this, is somebody managed somehow, by some miracle, to wire something together and send out a message even after all the telecommunication stuff was blown up. And that's when the U.S. Navy sent jets to go and rescue the ship. And McNamara, who's head of the Defense Department, ordered those planes back. And then another high-ranking military person in the Navy said, "I'm not taking those planes back. I need to hear this from a higher source." And LBJ got on the phone and said, "Take those planes back. We're not going to embarrass our allies." And many, many men were killed, maimed. And they were then told, when they got back to port, when the ship was dragged back to port, you talk about this and you are in deep, deep trouble. And so they, for the most part, kept to themselves about it. But many of them have now come out and explained everything. I mean, it's thoroughly documented. It was a deliberate attack by the state of Israel on U.S. Service people, murdering and maiming many of them. And LBJ was okay with it.
34 American soldiers were killed, 172 injured, casualty rate of 70%. Israel claimed mistaken identity. The ship's survivors were afraid to speak out in the early years because of threats of court-martial, prison, or worse. If they did not remain silent, Israel committed an act of war against the United States.
Yeah.
Orders to cover up the incident were issued by President Lyndon Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara.
How is that not treasonous?
It is.
It's a really good question.